Welcome to DT Madness, Chronicles from the Third Life, episode 36, December 3rd, 2022. So glad you could make it. Well, as you know, if you've listened to the past couple of weeks, one of the ways that I start off my morning routine is to read the entry for the day of what is called Your True Home. It's just little writings from Thich Nhat Hanh. And one of these the other day was talking about being angry at someone. If you're angry with someone, then just imagine what your life will be like 300 years from now. And that, and his point was that helps you to be a little bit less angry. But it got me to thinking about 300 years from now. That'll be, in just a month. It'll be 2323. 2,323 would be 300 years from now, and I can't even. It's impossible to imagine with the advance in technology. Although perhaps we will have worked our way back towards a more primitive age with all of our technology, but we'll see. I won't, and that's part of the point. Come back to that a little bit. Um, I've been thinking about next semester. We have just a few weeks left, about 8 days of instructional days, and then final exams start. And then we will take the break for Christmas and come back in January with new classes for the most part. Um, and so, I've talked about school reform and my ideas on education, and so I'm going to try to lay some of those out here. I'm already in the mode of trying to revamp my practice. Coming out of COVID, this is maybe the first year that it's really been fully, mostly back to normal, although it's just been crazy at our school with so much construction going on. And anyway, so I do have school reform dreams. I think about the time structure that we use, and whether 8 to 3 is even something that's valuable, and certainly our 90-minute class is worthwhile. Um, it's tough to keep anyone's attention span for 90 minutes. And of course, as teachers, we should chop up the block, as they say, and try to keep the kids moving around and whatever. But I don't think Monday through Friday 8 to 3 with a four bell system. It's not ideal. It's not what really works. And so it's there are things that I wish that we could change, but that just butts up against reality. And the reality is that in a lot of ways we are a daycare system. Um, and I don't necessarily mean that in a. It just is. What would these kids do if they weren't in the school building from 8 to 3? We know how much damage was done when we had remote learning. Many of these kids don't need to be at home. They don't need to be at home, even with so-called family. So much negative things going on. And so it'd be fun to play around with the actual structure, the institutional structure, but the realities are that we're going to have the kids from 8 to 3, and in many cases, the extracurricular activities, the more that they can be in the public school system, the better, And so we got to adjust to that, and there are political wins too. I live in a state which is controlled by a Republican legislature, which is just one vote shy of a supermajority where they could override a veto by the governor, which happens to be a Democrat, Cooper, at the time. Um, we probably aren't quite to the level of the Virginia governor and perhaps some of these other states where teacher tip lines and those types of things. But certainly our new school board members, they use the buzz phrases of critical race theory and gender studies and all that kind of stuff, just sending signals to teachers that you better be careful. Um, you gotta be watching your back a little bit. And so education's going to be on the forefront. The school board battles are at the forefront of our political turmoil during this time, and we'll see for how long. So anyway, there's all of that kind of stuff going on. So it'd be fun to sit down. It'd be fun to sit down and talk about some ideals of what if we could, if we could start from scratch and rearrange society and all that kind of stuff. Like what would be the best system for schooling and education and all that. And it'd be interesting, but the realities don't really allow that. I'm going to read an essay written by a student in Mr. Good's class. It says, in recent years, a debate has emerged about the significance of grades. Renowned educational researcher Alfie Kohn wrote, the more students are led to focus on how well they're doing, the less engaged they tend to be with what they're doing. While grades can have benefits overall, they do more harm than good. Grades tend to introduce the idea of perfection, which we are incapable of achieving. Rhonda Dixon, an English teacher at Crest High School, said, grades are a good motivator. The perfect answer would be that learning can't be quantified, but what would be the purpose? Nobody learns for the sake of learning. Ms. Dixon makes an excellent point when she references the lack of motivation among students, but people often forget that the deficit of motivation was initiated by grades. When kids are first placed into the school system, an immense amount of pressure is placed on reading for rewards, testing well for rewards, learning for rewards. If you haven't noticed, the key words here are for rewards. Psychology teacher Daniel Thomas stated that grades have too much value and they remove intrinsic motivation from learning. According to frontiersIN.org, intrinsic motivation is defined as the doing of an activity for its inherent satisfaction rather than for some separable consequence. As children, we are born with this motivation, but with the school system comes the replacement of intrinsic by extrinsic motivation. This refers to accomplishing a task for an outside reward, and it depletes intrinsic motivation. Why should we be rewarded for making a perfect score on a test and not for making mistakes that we can learn from? As someone who suffers from test anxiety, I can testify to the fact that grades are not representative of knowledge. My grandfather has been diagnosed with cancer for about 2 years now, and last week he had to have emergency surgery. I went to the hospital with the rest of my family because we did not know the severity of the surgery or the potential complexity of the recovery. We were at the hospital until 1 in the morning, and I had a chemistry test the next day. Even though I was under a lot of stress and shock, along with being extremely tired, I came to school the next day. My plan was to ask my teacher if I could study for the test during class and take it on a later day, as I had no time to study or prepare for the test the night before and was not in the mental space to do well. My teacher did not agree with my plan because she said it was my fault that I wasn't prepared. While some teachers prioritize grades, others understand the controversy of them. English teacher Donnie Good says grades are counterproductive to the nature of what school should be. Perhaps if school wasn't so focused on grades and proving ourselves based on a numerical value that we gain absolutely nothing from, and instead was focused on learning how to be a decent human being, we would not have to be so afraid of failing. In conclusion, grades are inadequate in describing someone's understanding of taught material and level of intelligence. Teachers should be more sympathetic towards students and less focused on the expectations of certain students. In the show Boy Meets World, Mr. Feeney says, you see, Mr. Matthews, education is not about obscure facts and little test scores. Education is about the overall effect of years of slow absorption of concepts, philosophies, approaches to problem solving. The whole process is so grand and all encompassing that it really can't be threatened by the occasional late night no hitter. It is important that a boy spend time with his father. And that's a 10th grader, sophomore, a 15-year-old, writing that. And a good introduction. So, you know, uh, ideally, I would make huge changes, but in reality, some of the things that I'm thinking about going forward, just kind of briefly. One of the things that I've got to learn better to teach my kids is how to Google information, which, it's interesting that Google is a verb. I saw a map from, I don't remember how long ago it was, 10 years ago, 10 or 15 maybe. And it showed the world and like what the most used internet search engine was. And it was spread out all around. Google was in parts, Explorer was in parts, Safari was in parts. Other ones that I hadn't heard of were in parts of the world. But if you look at that same map today, it's Google everywhere. That that particular um, platform dominates the globe, controls the flow of information in a lot of ways. And what I have found is that what my students do is simply type in the question that they have, find out whatever pops up on Google without clicking on any links, whatever just pops up at the top. And then they write that down. And it's right often enough to where, they've been conditioned into doing that. And part of that is my failure. This is still a hangover from COVID for them being able to get away with that. And so for me, I've got to do a better job of focusing on each individual student in terms of how they're processing that information. Um, but my idea really, honestly, is just to figure out maybe 7-minute windows, something like that, where I have to take them through steps of using Google or whatever to find out information, but in the in that process to figure out how to discern what the websites are, um, how to move forward when what you're writing down is perhaps accurate, but you're just copying and parroting and you really don't have any understanding. And so part of that is I've got to do better designing um, designing these assignments, these classroom activities, so that it's not just you know using just copying and pasting, honestly. So that's something that I've got to figure out, but that discernment, that consideration of all the different types of angles, it's tough. It's tough because of confirmation bias. We find what we're looking for and then we stop looking and we settle into these ideas that we've got it maybe figured out. But I try to teach my civic students that these issues that we deal with are complex. If they weren't, then we would just deal with them. We would just solve them. If the immigration issue was an easy fix, then we would all agree on it. If, energy usage and climate change and social issues and economic issues, whatever it is, like if they had simple fixes, then we would all pretty much be in agreement. And so trying to dig into what the different perspectives are, not that students can't form their own opinions once they do that, but actually going through that process. Memorization is fine. In fact, I probably lean too little on memorization. I think I moved away from it a couple of years ago because I kind of figured that all of the information in the entire, pretty much in the entire planet is at the touch of their fingertips and increasingly will be. I mean, these AI chatbots that are being displayed now, it's only a matter of time before information, it won't even be something that we have to look for. It will be readily available for us, maybe even at the thought. Going to be a wild transition into all that kind of stuff. But I forget sometimes that my students don't know the things that I know. They don't have a base of information. They don't know that there are three branches of government. My AP kids do for the most part, but many of the students just they don't have this type of knowledge. They don't have the basic facts of history or government or psychology or whatever I'm teaching. And so I do want to lean back a little bit more on memorization, um, on which to build these ideas of processing and discerning and all of that kind of stuff. And in the meantime, I'm still trying to figure out how to utilize technology. All of our students have Google Chromebooks. It was a great initiative, a one-to-one initiative, but they're just so slick. They know so many ways to get around filters and so many ways to get around teachers wandering around the classroom and who can only focus on one or two students at a time and they know all the little games to play. And I'm not mad at them about it, but I've got to figure out better ways to use technology. And honestly, I'm probably going to really fall back and have their laptops closed most of the times, and generate text on paper for them, um, and then use those 7 minute, 5 minute windows anyway. And I say 7 minutes and 5 minutes. One of the things I want to try to deal with is their attention spans. With all of our instant communication and everything, I mean, like, how long can you go without picking your phone up? I mean, we pick it up hundreds of times a day. I ask the students to check their numbers of pickups, and me too. I'm almost 45 years old. Anytime there's a silence, anytime there's a commercial, if we're watching TV, if you still have like live TV and you're not able to skip commercials, then, I pick the phone up just to check or whatever. And all of that kind of stuff has led to a decrease of our attention spans, which is, I mean, I don't know. And in many ways, I want to just get back to putting notes on the board like old school. Maybe I am getting old, but like putting notes on the board that they have to write down, where they do have to pay attention to what I'm saying. Now it'll be up to me to make it interesting. It'll be up to me to tell good stories, but I can do that. But somehow ways to manage attention spans of these students, um, and not make the excuse and say that we've got to break it up into 5 or 7 minute chunks, but to begin to develop the ability to pay attention for 10, 15 minutes at a time. That leads to differentiation, which is a thing that we talk about as teachers and stuff that's in teacher textbooks. But I don't know. I don't know. When I have students who can finish the assignments that I have in 20 minutes or 15 minutes, and the other students really do take double that amount of time. And it's not, look, some of them have figured out how to game the system, no doubt, no doubt. But some of them really do process slower, and they are working and they are trying and they are putting forth effort, but it just takes them double the amount of time. And when I've got 26 students in a classroom, and a third of them are, done in 10 minutes, a third of them are done in 20, and a third of them are done in 40, I don't know how I don't know how best to deal with that. I want to design my classroom such that I don't want it to be unfair for the students who are able to process faster, and so they have to do more quote unquote work. So I've got to redefine what I think about what classroom work is, and how best to maybe team the different levels of students up and work. That's good. I'm thinking in the midst of a podcast right now, so I'm going to have to write that part down. But I want them all, regardless of where their processing speeds are, what their levels of intelligence are. All of the kids can learn respect and soft skills, how to shake somebody's hand or fist bump them or look them in the eye, listen to them, at least to pretend to be listening, while I'm talking to you, to learn how to write resumes, to learn how to, do an interview, to learn how to manage emotions when you are fired up or are having a pretty bad day. That's a huge deal. It's a huge deal. Emotional intelligence is the educational imperative of our time. I said many years ago, and my friend Ryan Etheridge wrote that down. I think he tweeted it, but it's still the case. Emotional intelligence. We gotta figure out ways to, you know, help these kids deal. And in a lot of ways, in some cases, our teachers need help dealing. I'm moving on. Writing and expression, it's difficult because it does require a lot of attention and effort and extra work for teachers who are doing and pouring everything that they have out for the most part from 8 to 3. And then if you're really going to focus on writing and expression and those types of things, you're going to have to work during the hours where you're not getting paid. I don't know how to I don't know how to deal with that. It's just part of the job, though, and I see a lot of things about how teachers shouldn't be required to do that kind of stuff, and you know, I don't know what to say except for that if that's how you feel, I don't think you should go into the profession. Okay. Writing, expression, reading, reading, and not just for letting your eyes go across the words, but for comprehension, which will require differentiation. It will require, uh, you know, chunks, smaller chunks at least to start. But convincing kids that there is work worth doing. you know, that there's work worth doing, that work itself is worth doing. And I think that in our culture, and I'm definitely influenced by Wendell Berry here, that in a lot of ways, we have made manual labor, we have made the work that needs to be done, that can be done, we've made it beneath us. And we still talk about that in terms of how robots are going to take over these particular jobs. And so, you know, kids are just focused on making money. And when that's the only motivation for working, I don't know that there's much intrinsic value there. And so I think we've got to re-emphasize and reevaluate what work is, and what pride you can find in it. But that's a huge institutional challenge. So I talk a lot about grades, and I agree with the 10th grade person who I might know who wrote that. I was quoted in her essay. I'm not a big grades person. I do believe in the overjustification effect, that it takes intrinsic value away when it's replaced with extrinsic value. You can look that study up. Um, but I do believe in excellence. And I think that by removing our current practices in some ways, or at least by amending them, by uh, augmenting them in some ways, that we can return a pursuit of excellence to education that has been taken away, you know, in many ways, but by the grading system and by this, I don't know, I don't want to say performance based. That's not what I'm talking about. Some people are, some people are more capable in certain areas than others, and they should be recognized in that way. And it helps people figure out which ways they want to pursue. And so, anyway, I am in favor of excellence, and how to achieve that excellence, I guess, is what I am pondering here. Well, it's been quite a week, and I'll speak about that just a little bit in the second half. But it was 1 year ago, this past December 1st, just a couple days ago, that I got my tattoo. Um, 1 year later, and it's interesting because while we were sitting in the hospital during my dad's surgery, and waiting for all of that, down in the waiting room, there's a sailboat, a boat on the sea, and all this kind of stuff, and the big sign there says "Steer the course." And I was thinking about that during the time. My whole family was there, and I was just considering steer the course, and I appreciate that sentiment. Like, okay, some stuff's going to come up, and one of the ways that I've been thinking about is with Matt Damon's character in what is that movie about Mars? The Martian. There we go. Um, I think it's actually one of the people on the ship, and something goes wrong, and they just say you got to work the problem. You got to work the problem. And I think that's what steer the course is talking about. Um, and I was thinking about that in terms of my tattoo, because I do think that we need to work the problem, that instead of focusing too far in the future, or perhaps even in the past, that we should just steer the course. We should be where we are. But of course, my tattoo is more about surrender. My tattoo is based on burning down the mast, but setting sail, setting our direction for the new world, um, and then burning down the mast, because there is a sense of surrender that I can't really control the course as much as I want to, and so I have to be willing to surrender to the flow, as well as being willing to, along the way, continue to create ripples, to plant sequoias, you know, trees that I will not see. I will not get to see the fruit of my labor, but it's still worth doing. So maybe those things aren't all that different after all, as I talk through it, steer the course and burn down the mast, as you set sail for the new world. But anyway, still just one tattoo. A couple of other things before, or just one other thing. Sarah is in San Antonio this weekend for a trio trip. She's down at some conferences down there and hanging out with our friend Anna Grace on the Riverwalk there, and listening to mariachi bands and such. And so, man, I was um, I made my own lunch. I made my lunch for school, and so I just made some peanut butter and jelly. And I'm a man child, and I like my peanut butter and jelly sandwiches folded in half, like on one piece of bread, folded in half. But I like four halves, and so I'm really eating two peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, but they're in four halves, and it's just easy to pick up, and I like the bite-sized portions of it, and it's just perfect for me. I love it so much. And so I made my own peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. Sarah usually takes care of me in those ways, and I put way too much jelly, man. That junk was coming all out all over the place. I had to put like three napkins in the Tupperware just to keep it um, anyway. And then I was making my cachava smoothie, which already Sarah already creates the bags for me with blueberries, avocado, frozen avocado, spinach, and it's all frozen in little baggies, and so I can just dump it right in the blender with my 2 scoops of cachava, 14 ounces of water, boom, pour it all in there, blend it up. But sometimes like it takes a minute, and the frozen part doesn't get stirred up. I'm whirling my finger around right now. I know you can't see me, but I'm definitely having my own hand visuals here. But I took a spoon so that I could kind of jab um, the frozen part down into the blender so it would blend up before school. And I put the spoon a little bit too far down, and it hit the blade, and it just exploded the purple blueberry cachava mixture all over the place. And so now I'm wiping down cabinets. This is right before school. So anyway, listen, I'm a grown man. I am a grown man, almost 45 years old. And to be fair, like I'm a feminist. I was a feminist before my wife was. I think I can probably say that with some truth, with some accuracy. Um, but I do like it when my wife is here to make my lunch for school. All right, let's wrap up 23, 23. Um, just a couple of items from Thanksgiving week, I guess, and so we went up to my mother-in-law's house for Thanksgiving, and Sydney and I rode up a little bit later. Big crowds are not our favorite. We got there a little too early anyway, and it was still kind of craziness and just they're loud people. They just are. They're loud people, and it's not bad. I don't mean that bad. It just is. Always has been that way. They enjoy talking loudly. And there was a bunch of new people there that I didn't know, and so Sydney and I retreated into the basement up there in Statesville, and Sydney was playing piano, and I was just looking around. We still got some junk stored down in my mother in law's basement, but I found a lava lamp, and I asked if I could have it. And when I was a high schooler, I had a lava lamp, and it was orange, and this one's light blue, and it works, and it makes me so glad I've got it in my room. So that was cool. And then the Monday after Thanksgiving, I got to go to a school called Township 3. It's not in Boiling Springs, and so, but it was the PALS Literacy Day there. So they had people coming in to read for all different classes, and I got to go to my friend Danielle Ledbetter Kings, who we went to high school together, and she has a class of all special needs kids, mostly labeled or whatever, mostly categorized as with autism. But I think there were 9 of them, and oh my gosh, it was so awesome. I read the Itty Bitty Frog. They loved my baby bird voice. They each of them wanted to get individual pictures with me. Oh man, it was so awesome. That made me so happy. What a great group of kids, and what an amazing teacher Miss King is. Another day, I was walking around. I've been writing cards. I got some cards with the town of Boiling Springs logo. I'm the mayor, isn't that wild? And I've been writing little notes of happy holidays and Merry Christmas to the local businesses in town, and just kind of touching base because there's some ideas that I have to begin to draw the network of local businesses a little tighter so that we can both recruit new businesses but also to support the ones that are here. So I've been walking around and hand delivering those so I can introduce myself. And as I was going into the insurance place, the local insurance place, Max Hamrick, one of my old students was running by. His name's Travis Lanier, and he was like, "Mr. Thomas," and I'm like, I knew it was him. I didn't remember his name, and I appreciated the fact that he was like Travis Lanier, and I did knew it started with a T. I really did. And we we dapped up, and but he gave me a hug too, and oh man, it's just so awesome. I mean, Travis wasn't in my class; he was in my class like I don't know 8, 9 years ago. I don't know how long. Time is weird now. It just made me glad, man. Just made me so glad that getting to do all those kinds of things at once, like delivering these cards, but also, um, having old students come by. Um, and then a couple of days after we had, I guess I'm out of order here a little bit, but that's okay. The Monday after the Sunday of Thanksgiving, so I guess it was the same day I went to read to number three. Um, my dad had to go to the hospital. He had a hernia that blocked it clamped up on his intestines, I guess, and on his bowels, and it was backing up. And my dad's been struggling with cancer for the last couple of years, and it was just it was a real thing because doing a hernia surgery on someone in Pop's condition was risky, and so our family got together. We all came down to the hospital. Me and Sarah and Sydney and Isaac were there, and my brother and his wife and daughter. The other two boys are in college. They came down. Sam drove down from Boone. He got there right at the time where the good news was delivered, and so that was good. My sister and her husband were there, and we were all sitting there supporting my mom. They let us sit in the main waiting room area, which was really closed off for everyone else. And so, I was sitting there. I had fish radio in one ear, listening to a show, and that helps to calm me down. But I really was doing pretty well in the moment. It was just a good few days though of the family rallying together. My dad was able to come through the surgery. Um, they were able to heal that, like actually do more than they thought they were going to be able to do, and actually repairing the hernia. And after a couple of days in the hospital, he was able to come home. But we would go visit him. Um, my daughter is not a big fan of elevators, but she overcame that. She overcame that so that we could get to the fifth floor to see Pop. So many people in town were offering their prayers and their support and their kindness. And I've come to grips with where we are in time. Um, it's a it's a thing, Like, I hate to see my dad in pain. I know that these days that we have now are each one is special. It should always be that way, but mortality has a way of bringing focus. My dad takes pain in stride the ways I hope I can do half as well. He's still, talking junk and ornery kind of old man in the room, even while the nurses are in there, and so still cracking jokes. And while we were there, I made him laugh. We handed him our Christmas card. If you want one, send me your address. We got 80 of them, so please send me your address, and I'll be glad to send you our Christmas card. But it's overlooking a field. My mom was like, "Where's that field?" And I was like, "It's across the street." And I like to think those cows over there are mine. I like to sit there and pretend that they're mine, and that made my dad laugh. But he had just had hernia surgery, and so the laughter was beautiful for a second until that laughter caused him a great deal of pain. And in some mysterious way, that part was beautiful too. The pain. He held up our Christmas card picture and teared up, and really all he could get out was, "That's a fine family." The day after that, I started crying on the way to school. We were listening to Kenny and Dolly, the song "The Greatest Gift of All." And I mean, I just remember growing up. I told you about that last week. And I guess maybe I'd had some of that. I probably hold my emotions in a little bit too much. And it just kind of came out driving to school. And my daughter put her hand on mine, and just beautiful, man. My mom's birthday was December 1st, and my dad got to come home, on that day. And so we're in the moment as best we can. Last night, I got to be the mayor and go to our Christmas tree lighting, the town's Christmas tree lighting. And I got to give a little speech, a little Christmas message and let everybody know, like, in our town, it really is true that help and prayers and encouragement and support, they're not far away. People are ready in an instant to provide, and not just with thoughts and prayers, even though those are valuable. That energy is valuable. I don't care what anybody says. But also with food and with help, with assistance. I dropped a Dave Matthews reference in my Christmas message, talked about the giggling, dribbling baby boy, and at least our town manager got it. And then after that, I got to read The Grinch to a bunch of kids, and it was just awesome. Little kids just rambunctious and talking about all this stuff, and I was making them make the Grinch face, and I gave them fist bumps at the end, and many of them wanted to get pictures made with me, and I had on my Christmas llama sweater. And just now, while I was planning this thing out, I went to Hannah's coffee shop over in Shelby, and I was drinking my coffee and eating my blueberry scone, which is the thing I do now, and typing this thing up a little bit, outlining it out. And then I went up to get to go, and Hannah was actually there, the owner of Hannah's coffee shop. And she said, "Can I get something started for you?" And I was like, "Yeah, can I get a chai with oat milk because that's what my daughter was requested? And also, can I get a coffee shop in Boiling Springs?" And so then I was able to strike up a conversation. I love doing this. I love being mayor. It's been a really good week of being mayor and trying to highlight some of the many good things in our town. I I'm good at it. I try not to get carried away. I want to make sure that I highlight all of the people who are doing things so that there aren't people who think I'm trying to be my own thing, because that's not the case. At least I hope. At least most of the time. Um, but anyway, it was just a good week. So 23, 23, 300 years from now, the idea is impermanence. Things are not permanent, and so instead of that bringing anxiety, instead of that bringing fear and worry, it should set us free. It should help us to surrender. Because this moment right now, like recording this podcast while I'm making these hand signals with my hand that you can't see, watching this candle burn and sipping this coffee, it's this is what's good. The one single moment. After I read to those kids, like after I read to those kids at number three, that the group with special needs, I just had this thought that one moment like that in a day is it makes the whole day worthy, right? And maybe one single moment makes existence worthy. And I don't know that worthy is the word I'm looking for there, but it makes it meaningful. One conscious breath. If you just take one conscious breath a day, then that's meaningful. And I suspect that even the breaths that aren't conscious, even when we get lost and we are not aware, even then, aware of the door in the hospital room, not just the major moments, not just the phenomenal and fantastic things, but being conscious of how you open and close a door, being conscious of someone else who would rather have it open or rather have it closed, or it's the moment, when you get on the elevator and you overcome fear. But it's also the moment where you don't get on the elevator because you don't overcome fear. It's the moment where you go about doing things unselfishly and highlighting everyone else, and you really are in that zone. But it's also when you get wrapped up in self glory. It's the moment when you master your emotions, if only for a time, but also when they blow through your very existence like a Cat 5 hurricane. It's the kind words you grant and the moments when you're a complete ass. Because we learn, or at least learning should be our aim, just like the Grinch and Scrooge. Don't call somebody a Grinch or a Scrooge in a negative way. Forget. And forget about how the story ends. They are redeemed. They learn. Learning should be our aim. But we learn not for something such as grades or accolades or resumes or even jobs, even though all of those things are essential in their own ways. But because learning leads us to become human, to become more fully human. It opens our eyes. It slows things down. It grants perspective and passion. It lends to compassion and conviviality, which is one of my favorite words that Wendell Berry uses. You'll have to Google that up. Maybe I'll figure out a 7-minute window for you. But when our institutions are gone, you know, in 300 years, our institutions and our economic systems will likely be faded away. I will be faded away. When the toys that we play with and the games that we play and all these kinds of things, these things that are passing, these things that too shall pass. When all of that stuff is faded away in 23-23, when we are faded away in 23-23, learning to be compassionate, learning to gain perspective and how to treat people well and how to love ourselves, how to add to the human story with our intellect, with our emotional intelligence, with our passion and our compassion, those things will last. That's why we learn. Well, this has been a Church of Six production brought to you by the Bucket of Life, by the Foundation Tower of Stone, by the Wall of Belief, by the Magic Rock, and by the Token of Hope. This too shall pass. Don't forget to believe, y'all, and be live. Peace, my friends.